All right, here we go. All right, welcome back to the JFK Assassination Audit, video number 45. And it's now 19 January. We're going to keep going through these statements, going through these timeline, and find those little gems that we're looking for. And this great big Warren Commission JFK assassination pile of shit. All right. So we were talking about Bookout, and remember how Bookout had been changing statements, lying on his reports, changing reports, things like that. So we're just going to keep looking, and seeing what we can find here. Because this is how operators work like this, is that they're doing things, changing it to fit the scenario that they want or their bosses want, and then they're hoping you don't catch them. Okay, and if you do, so what? I'm an FBI agent. What are you going to do? Ha. So, but we're going to catch them, and then that'll give you motivation, because it's apparent from what Bookout's saying, he's getting special instructions from the special agent in charge back in Washington, D.C. Okay, and they're telling him to cooperate, don't cooperate, all these kinds of things. So we're going to keep going along here and see what's happening here. All right, so it says, Mr. Stern, would you say he had a pretty good idea of what might be incriminating and what might what not incriminating? Bookout, well, I think that would call for an opinion, and I can only report the facts to you. Oh yeah. And based on the example of the type of questions that I commented on that he refused to answer, you will have to draw your own conclusion on that. Fine. I'm just trying to get at whether he seemed in command of himself and alert, or whether he handled himself responsibly from his own viewpoint. But if you don't want to venture an opinion, that's fine. When you first joined the interview, did you advise him that you were an agent of the FBI, and did he say anything about warning him that evidence that anything he said would be used? Yes, that was done by Agent Hosty. Did he at that point or later say anything specifically regarding the FBI? Yes. Tell us what he said. He accused the FBI of generally unfair tactics in interviewing his wife on some previous occasions. So apparently, the FBI was aware of them and knew them, and of course they're going to be checking them out because, again, they don't know if his wife is working for the Soviets. They don't know if he's working for the Soviets, okay? And I just saw another video of Hosty saying that in October he had received special instructions to try to contact Oswald because they had received information that Oswald had gone to the Cuban and Russian embassies in Mexico City and all these kinds of things, and they were trying to ascertain what he was doing there. So they wanted Agent Hosty to contact the wife and contact Oswald to do that. Let's see. Was this directly, specifically at either you or Hosty, or to the general? It was directed against Hosty. Oswald did not indicate that he knew Hosty himself, did he? No. He probably knew of Hosty because Mrs. Payne and Marina had told him. But there was a complaint about an interview or an interrogation of Marina Oswald? Right. Did he say anything about the FBI interviews of him? Did he say anything about FBI interviews of him that had occurred in the past? Any complaint about such interviews? I don't know. That would be in the particular interview, but in one of the interviews which was reported, he stated that he had been interviewed at Fort Worth, Texas by agents upon his return to the United States from Russia, and he felt that they had used unfair means of interviewing him or something. Those are not his exact words, but that is the impression he conveyed. Unfair in what respect? I don't know. Did he say? No. Tell us the nature of the complaint. I think he probably used the expression unfair tactics or something in their interviews. Yes, did he indicate that he felt that the interview that was that was then going on was unfair in any way. Did he complain about that? No, he didn't complain about the interview. He made a complaint or two, as I recall, that one of the interviews that has been reported, in fact, I believe it was the first interview, he complained about his hands being handcuffed behind his back and asked Captain Fritz to remove the handcuffs. Captain Fritz had one of his officers unhandcuff his hands from behind his back and recuffed them in the front and asked him if he was more satisfied, and he stated that he was. Any other aspect of his treatment that he complained of? I recall one of the interviews that he complained about the lineup that he was in, that he wasn't allowed to wear a jacket similar to the jackets worn by others in the lineup. Did this occur at the lineup or subsequently? This was one of the interviews in Captain Fritz's office, referring to the lineup that had subsequently been held, previously been held. During the first interview, was he asked whether he had ever been in Mexico, and if so, by whom? Yes, I recall Hosty asking him if he had ever been in Mexico. What did he say? He said he had not. I believe he mentioned that he had been in Tijuana, Mexico, but I believe the question was whether he had ever been to Mexico City. Was he asked about an organization called the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, and if so, by whom? By whom? Whom? Yes, he was asked if he belonged to that. I don't recall specifically who raised the question. What did he say? He said he was a member of it and was secretary of the New Orleans branch. I believe he said headquarters was in New York City. Was there much discussion of this or just the identification? Well, now, that is another instance where he balked on answering a question. He was asked who the officers were, and at that point, he said he refused to discuss the matter further. Was he asked his residence address in Dallas, and did he give it? Yes, he furnished the address of 1026 North Beckley. Did he say that he was living under another name, or was he another name in particular, the name O.H. Lee, mentioned at all in this connection? It's really weird that these aren't really questions. These are just leading statements. It's almost like they had already agreed that, okay, we're going to read these things, and then you just give us the answers that you gave us before. It's not even really any kind of cross-examination here. He was asked why he was using the name Lee at this address, and he attempted to pass it off as stating that the landlord was an old lady, and his first name was Lee, and that she had gotten it in her head that he was Mr. Lee. He never did explain the initials OH. So I've had this happen before a lot of times, especially foreigners and people who don't understand English and stuff like that. And in Asia, in some countries in Asia, like China, I believe, the last name, the family name is first, and the individual's name is last. So if someone would be named Wen Lee, in the United States, or if someone's named Wen Lee in China, that means their first name in the United States would be Lee, and their last name would be Wen. But in the United States, they would be Lee Wen. Okay, and I've had many people call me, Mr. Justin or Pafford, or for a first name. Matter of fact, I was in the Army. That's all they called you, is by your last name. Also, I seem to remember when I was in Israel that I was dating this girl, and I was discussing with her father about how he came to Israel and how his name and stuff like that. And he said that his first name was actually Yitzhak, and that his last name, I couldn't remember now what his last name was. We'll just say Sapir, okay? But when he got to Israel, because he didn't speak Hebrew and only spoke Hindi, I believe, or Malayaman or something like that, this language is local language, that they didn't understand what he was saying. And so they took his first name, Yitzhak, and they made that his last name. And then they took his last name and they made it his first name. So on his ID cards ever since then, you think he would have got this corrected since like 1950 something, but he said that on his ID cards he's gone by Sapir Yitzhak. And then, it's kind of strange because now all his children are named by his first name, Yitzhak, for a last name. It's just very strange. But anyway, so that's not uncommon, especially you got old ladies and, you're just giving them money and they don't really, just as long as you give me money, you don't really care who it is, So O.H. Lee, that makes perfect sense. Was he asked whether he had shot the president or Officer Tippit? Yes, he was asked that, and he denied either one of them and knowing anything about it. Was he asked whether he was carrying a pistol at the time he was in the Texas theater? Yes, that was brought up. He admitted that he was carrying a pistol at the time he was arrested. He claimed that he had bought this some time ago in Fort Worth. He said he had gotten it in Fort Worth. That is my recollection, and there again, in trying to follow through on the line of thought, he refused to answer any questions as to whereabouts in Fort Worth he had bought it. And again, that brings up another question. Why would Oswald or whoever purchase this rifle, purchase this handgun through a mail order company, through a post office box he's going to have to sign for, and that, he's sending a money order that he's having to sign for, okay, when he could easily walk into any shop in Dallas or Irving, give him his Lee Heidel false ID, okay, and purchase the weapon, both weapons, and no one would have known, okay. Anyway, let's see, Mr. Brookout. That was my recollection, and there again, in trying to follow through on that line of thought, he refused to answer any further questions. Did he talk about his arrest and his resistance of arrest at the Texas Theater? Mr. Brookout. He admitted fighting with the officer at the time of the arrest, but I don't recall any explanations as to why he was doing it. Did he admit that he might have been wrong in doing that, or say anything to that effect? Seemed to me like he made the comment that the only thing he was guilty of, or only thing that he could be charged with, would be carrying a concealed weapon and resisting arrest, or striking a police officer, as he said. When he was asked about the involvement in the assassination of the President Kennedy or the shooting of Officer Tippit, how would you describe his denials? Well, I don't know exactly how to describe it. It was, but as I recall, he spoke very loudly. In other words, he gave an emphatic denial that is about all I can recall of it. Now again, if you didn't do something, don't you think you would be, animated and pretty loud about emphasizing that you didn't kill somebody, especially when you know there's a death penalty involved? If you killed somebody, don't you think he would have shut up? See, this is another reasoning that, they're trying to make it that he's screaming and loud and emphatic because he's crazy, okay? But we're going to read some conversations where he has pretty logical conversations and comments with people that a crazy person wouldn't come up with, okay? And even though he's calm and cool, he's still pretty fanatical that he didn't, commit the crime. That's exactly what you would be. That's exactly the way I would be if we were accused of a crime. We're surrounded by the police. We're in handcuffs. You don't know when you're going to get out. You don't know when you're going to see a lawyer. So you would just keep repeating, hey, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Be pretty standard right there. Hold on one second. All right. I believe that in the report you filed on this first interview, you or Agent Hosty, who joined you in the report with you, used the adverb frantically. frantically to describe his denial of an involvement. Does that refresh your recollection as to that? Would you use the word now, or was that your word? Book out. No, that was written by Hosty, and that would be his expression of describing it. Do you think emphatically is perhaps the more descriptive word now? Well, that would be the way I would describe it. As I said, he spoke. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. He spoke loudly. Alright, so we got frantically and emphatically. And what is the difference? Well, it says here, frantically, in a distraught way, owing to fear, anxiety, or other emotion. Women wept as they frantically searched for the missing children. In a hurried, excited, or disorganized manner, the two ladies competing for his attention waved frantically at him. Let's see, frantically. In a very great hurry, or often in a state of excitement or confusion, inside decorators worked frantically to solve the last-minute problems. The meaning of frantically is a frantic manner, in a nervous, hurried, desperate, or panic-stricken way. How to use frantically in a sentence. In a desperate, wild, frenzy way, out of extreme excitement, pain, fear, all the time, I was searching frantically in the trash can for my missing whatever. So, distraught, fear, anxiety, emotional, hurried, that all makes, that verb right there, or is it not verb, excuse me, adverb, makes perfect sense. All those things Oswald would be feeling: fear, anxiety, emotional, hurried, excited, disorganized. That all makes perfect sense of a man caught and desperate to convince people that are not working in his best interest that he didn't do what he did. Okay? All right, let's take a look at that word emphatically, that Bookout would prefer to use. In a forceful way. She closed the door behind her emphatically, without doubt, clearly. Jane, though born in California, feels emphatically Canadian. Let's see. Uttered or marked by emphasis. Tending to express oneself in a forceful speech or action. Attracting special attention. Let's see, what else do we have here? Emphatically, in a forceful way, used to emphasize what you are saying in a forceful way. If you say something emphatically, you say it in a forceful way, which shows that you feel very strongly about what you're saying. So, what's the key word there? Forceful. And in frantically, the key word is fear. Okay? So, if you're trying to imply that Oswald was fearful and was loudly protesting his innocence, you would go with frantically. If you were trying to say that Oswald was cool and collected but forceful about his denial, then you would use Bookout's word emphatically. Very minor differences there, but important. Alright, let's see. I am most interested in getting the tone of this interrogation and his state, the way he conducted himself, and that is why I asked this question. And there is something of a difference between saying a man is acting frantically as opposed to his acting emphatically, just like I just said. Well, I suppose the word frantically would probably describe it. See, now he's changing it back. In other words, he said that he spoke loudly. I said that he spoke loudly. There just wasn't a normal type of denial. It was more than that. That is the reason I say that probably frantically might be a descriptive word. So even Bookout is sensing that it was more than just a standard denial of a guilty man. This is probably a not guilty man. Did that occur only in connection with the questions about whether he had shot the president, or was there a general tone of this interrogation as far as he was concerned at that level? No. He wouldn't use the same expression of speech in answering all questions. He would have certain kinds there and certain types of questions that he would apparently have stronger feelings on. Well, that makes sense. Okay, because what we're looking at are several different things, okay? Shooting the president, shooting Officer Tippett, and carrying a gun illegally, and hitting an officer. So if you know that you're guilty of those last two things, carrying a gun concealed and hitting an officer, you're not going to be as fanatically or emphatic about denying that. Okay, matter of fact, he's not even denying it. And then if you didn't shoot the president, you're going to be pretty damn emphatic and fanatical about it. Same thing with Officer Tippett, but maybe you didn't shoot the president, and then maybe you know Officer Tippett, and you know that he was part of the plot, and he was probably pulling his gun to shoot you right there, or take you back to the group that shot the president. Maybe you shot Officer Tippett. Maybe you're not as fanatical about that. Anyway, let's see. Did that occur only in connection with questions about whether he had shot the president, or was the general tone of his interrogation as far as he was concerned at that level? No, he wouldn't use the same expression of speech in answering all questions. He would have certain kinds there and certain types of questions that would he apparently have strong feelings on. Do you recall at any time his pounding on the desk or making any other physical gestures of that kind? I don't recall him pounding on the desk. No, sir. Well, his hands are handcuffed in front of him. Now, this interview, as I understand, took approximately an hour. That's correct. Mr. Stern, according to this report, you and Agent Hosey entered the interview around 3:15 p.m. and ended it at 4:05 p.m. Now, again, I don't know how more to emphasize this, that Oswald's arrested at 1:50 at the Texas School Book Depository. If you give him 5 minutes to get it out to the car, 5-10 minutes, we'll say 15 minutes to get back to the police station, 5 minutes to get into the interrogation room. So you're looking at 25 minutes minus the 10 minutes from 1:50 to 2 o'clock. So you're looking at 2:15. So for 1 hour, from 2:15 to 3:15, where was Oswald before he got back to the station? Because Bookout says they went straight into the interrogation within 5 minutes after they brought Oswald in. So where was Oswald for an hour? Very interesting. All right, so I jumped down my timeline here, and I just wanted to confirm this. So yeah, there it is, true. It says 1:50, almost 24 policemen, sheriff, and detectives, and several patrol cars arrived at the Texas Theater because they believed Tippett's killer was inside. When an arrest attempt was made at 1:50 inside the Texas School Book, inside the theater, Oswald resisted arrest and, according to the police, attempted to shoot a patrolman after yelling, "Well, it's all over now," then punched the patrolman. So I always find it interesting that Oswald, okay, now you're right-handed, okay? If you're going to punch someone, you're usually going to use your right fist, okay? And if you're right-handed, if you're going to shoot someone, you're usually going to use your right hand, okay? So my question is, the story goes that Oswald pulled his gun, tried to fire it, and then the officer put the skin part between his thumb and his finger into the cocked back, hammer of the revolver. It snapped, and then it stopped the shooting, okay, because he had the pistol drawn and put it into the gut of the police officer. But yet, there's also the same police officer saying that the gun didn't go off, that it clicked. There's other versions of they heard it click, hitting metal on metal, not the skin, and that the gun misfired. And the reason that the gun misfired is because the pin was crooked. That's version number 2. The third version is somehow Oswald gets his fist out and punches a police officer because he's admitting it there. So that's how do you do all three of those things with the same hand, with the same gun? It's impossible to do all those three things. So somebody in between, in there somewhere, is the truth somewhere. Anyway, so he brought him back, and it says here, according to this, it says that the police did a paraffin test on him at 2 p.m. I believe that was actually later. Okay. They also, around the same time that they were arresting Oswald, had sent people, before they arrest Oswald, they sent people that arrived in Irving right before 2 o'clock, right after Oswald was arrested. So they already knew that Oswald was a suspect of some kind. Also around the same time, okay, the pristine bullet shows up at Parkland Hospital. Okay. Oswald's taken in and interviewed by Jim Lavelle. And at the same time, this is all right within a few minutes, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Jones of the 112th Military Intelligence Group of San Antonio, Texas, sends an FBI file on Oswald. Sends FBI file on Oswald. Now, how someone in the military intelligence would get a hold of an FBI file, which is a civilian, on a civilian, I don't understand. But, so you got all these three things going on at once there. You've got Oswald being arrested and brought in for interrogation. You've got police arriving at Oswald's wife's residence in Irving. And then you've got Lieutenant Colonel Robert Jones sending the police or somebody, the FBI, an FBI file, even though he's in the military, on Oswald. Why the military intelligence would be keeping a file, an FBI file on Oswald, who knows? Alright, so we get back to our timeline here. But so you see there that the reason I'm going through this, okay, we'll scroll down here. It says here at 2:20, Agent Hosty is interrogating Oswald. But we just read from Bookout that Bookout said it was at 3:15 that they went in to interrogate Oswald. So how is that possible? Hold on one second. Let me correct my spelling here. Alright, it says Oswald, 3:15, Oswald arrives at police station, taken to Fritz's office for interrogation with Hosty and Bookout. Doesn't make any sense. Let me change some notes here. Alright, hold on one second. Alright. According to this report, UN Agent Hosty entered the interview during around 3:15 and it ended at 4:05. So again, doesn't make any sense. Where was Oswald for that hour? Was he being interviewed, fingerprinted? What the hell's going on? Did it take an hour to fingerprint someone? Anyway, and even says, Bookout says that would be correct. Were these times that you and Hosty would have recorded at the moment in an ordinary course of your participation? That's correct. There was no log made of it as such, but there were times recorded for that particular interview. Wait, hold on. Were these times that you or Hosty could have, were there times that you or Hosty would have recorded at that moment in the ordinary course of your participation? That's correct. Okay, some times, okay, 3:15. There was no log made of it as such, but there were times recorded for that particular interview. See, like I said, most cops carry around a notepad, and they're always writing down dates, times, names, places, who, what, when, where, how. This is just basic common sense things here. And if you're an FBI agent, you're most definitely going to know these things. Let's see, your normal practice is to get times down pretty accurately in the matter of this. Try to. And did you make the record of these times, or did Agent Hosty? I can say that I did. Where he did not, whether he did or did not, I don't know. Incidentally, normally you preserve those notes or destroy them when you make a formal report. They will be normally destroyed at the time you make your, what we refer to an interview report. And in this case, did you destroy your notes? That's correct. So you have no notes representing this whole matter. See, how many times have we seen on TV and regular court cases where an officer gets up on stage, okay, up on the witness stand, and they've actually confiscated his notepad, okay, his notebook, as evidence, and they take that out and they say, "Officer, will you identify this as your notebook, notepad?" And he'll say, "Yeah, that's my writing." Okay, well, can you read on page 24 the notes that you wrote, right? Okay. But here we have FBI agents in a federal case destroying their own notes. Okay. How do we know that's correct? I mean, I doubt they would do that nowadays. And again, if Oswald had gone to trial and any halfway decent attorney was able to cross-examine Agent Bookout, they would have brought Agent Bookout up onto the stage, up onto the witness stand, and extensively grilled him about destroying his notes. Of course, his defense would be that standard practice. Okay. Well, how do you even know that anything you wrote down or typed up is correct because you destroyed your own notes? Anyway. So again, you'd have to throw out some testimony. There'd be if I was a lawyer, I'd put a lot of doubt into the accuracy of these times. And again, we do see doubt in the times because Oswald would have been there by 2:15 at the latest, and he's saying that it was 3:15 when he went into the interview. So either his notes are incorrect or he's lying, or Oswald was gone for an hour. And again, this is the second time we've caught Bookout stating something incorrectly. Okay. Bookout changed it from 27 inches to 42 inches that Lenny Mae Randall said the rifle, or not the rifle, but the package that Oswald was carrying was the length. The time obviously had to have been 2:15, 2:30 at the latest that Oswald went into interview with them, with Fritz, but yet we have Bookout saying right here it's 3:15. But there's no notes. They've all been destroyed, just like the autopsy report notes were burnt. There's no notes. It's just whatever is typed up. Pretty shitty work. Pretty crappy. Again, a decent lawyer could completely destroy and have shit thrown out, any kind of evidence presented by this man, because here's a second incident, maybe a third incident, of him lying and changing information. And you can see here, this is what Stern is getting to, because now Stern is like me. He's confused because he's talked to Fritz, he's talked to other officers, he's talked to Lavelle, and it was all 2:15, 2:30 that Oswald went into interrogation. But we got FBI agent Bookout saying it was definitely 3:15, but I have no notes to prove it. let's see where else turn goes on this, because the job of these attorneys is not to embarrass FBI agents and to catch them on ahas. The job is just to keep pushing for evidence to show that Oswald was the shooter and was guilty. So I doubt they're going to push him any further on this. Book out. They will be normally destroyed at the time you make your what we refer to as an interview report. And you've seen on there how his interview reports about something that happened on the 22nd, he actually types it up supposedly or signs it on the 23rd and files it on the 26th after Oswald's dead. Anyway, and in this case, did you destroy your notes? That's correct. So you have no notes respecting this whole matter. No, other than the reported interviewing report. Yes, when the first interview was concluded, it was, as I understand it, to take Oswald before lineup. That's correct. See how they shift, they change, because they didn't want to keep pushing that maybe what Bookout is reporting is incorrect. Besides, just an hour, who cares? No big deal. 2:15, 3:15, Oswald ain't going nowhere, right? Did you go with the police taking Oswald? No, I didn't go with them. In other words, it was strictly, as far as we were concerned, a police operation. I did proceed to the lineup room and observed it for the purpose of maintaining our liaison and keeping up with what was going on. Wait a minute. Why does he say no? Did you go with the police taking Oswald? No, I didn't go with him, but he went to the. I did proceed to the lineup room. Okay, so he's saying that he didn't escort Oswald with the police. He just went straight to the lineup room. Okay. Did you recall how many people were in the lineup? It was a 4-man lineup. Did you know any of the people? No. Did you recall now their physical characteristics as related to Oswald's physical characteristics? Were they the same size as he, or noticeably larger or smaller? I observed that the lineup consisted of 4 men who were numbered from left to right, 1 through 4. Oswald was number 2 in the lineup. All the individuals appeared to be the same general age, height, and weight, and they were white American males. Now, I've heard from other lineups that Oswald did that everyone was wearing a jacket except for him. Everyone had a shower except for him. People had seen Oswald in his T-shirt on TV, and here Oswald is in the interrogation in his T-shirt in the lineup. There was one of the guys was a Mexican, another guy was like 40-something years old. So, and then also I had heard that they had to step forward, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, step forward and give us your name and place of employment. And Oswald had to step forward and say, my name is Lee Oswald, I work in the Texas School Book Depository. So that's not really a very unbiased, equal type of lineup. Because if you're a witness, okay, and you know that the president was shot from the Texas School Book Depository, and you've seen Oswald being paraded up and down, the hallways, and you come in there to identify, well, you're going to go with that person because the pressure's on, okay? People are notoriously horrible at identifying witnesses and people, okay? And really, the only witnesses we're really going to be looking at are the people who saw the shooters, okay, or the shooter. And we're going to go through those statements, and it's all many different types of descriptions. Some African-American male, a Hispanic male, a guy that's 40, a guy that's bald. None of them, except Brennan, fit the description of Oswald. All right, let's see. Oh, we got to stop here. All right, so we'll stop here. We'll come back, and we'll keep driving on. And again, stuff that we've just caught Bookout on would not be acceptable in the FBI today, and would be torn to pieces if Oswald had ever had a trial. But of course, there's no trial, there's no defense, lawyer for Oswald. I don't know how many times I got to emphasize this, but this is the major difference between a propaganda piece being put out by the Warren Commission and the government saying this is what happened, and basically just, if you can't beat him with facts, like Oswald's fingerprints on the rifle, Oswald's fingerprints, or there's paraffin tests, it was positive for Oswald's face. If you don't have that, and Oswald's fingerprints are on the handgun, if you don't have that, you overwhelm him with bullshit. Okay? You got a jury of 100 million American people, and you overwhelm them with bullshit, and then you selectively put out newscasts, propaganda with Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather saying this links that and that links this, okay? And even Dan Rather is showing you that that package would not fit and could be carried the way Frazier said it was carried. And so the emphasis, the impression is that, Frazier and Lenny Mae Randall are just a bunch of hicks. They were mistaken. They only saw it for a couple of seconds. But we know the truth. Don't believe their lying eyes. Believe our lies, okay? Anyway. So we'll keep going on, keep driving on. And I don't have a lot of respect for Bookout, but we'll keep going on here. All right, so we're back into our intelligence vocabulary, I guess you could say, and how it relates to the JFK assassination. Hospital, Russian slang for prison, pretty self-explanatory. Human intelligence collected from human sources. Well, that's going to be Oswald. That's going to be Marina. That's going to be Mrs. Payne. That's going to be George de Mohrenschildt. All these people are reporting back their interactions with Oswald, their interactions with other people, and they're reporting all that back to their handlers, maybe even typing up some kind of report. I do find it interesting that Oswald, okay, who has come back from being in Russia on his false defection BS, working, studiously to pay back his loan so he could buy that rifle and get that passport, was also taking typing lessons 2 times a week. Okay? So instead of having sex with his wife, which is what she was wanting, and taking care of his family, he was learning to type. Why? Why would he be learning to type? Well, you could think of one thing is maybe he's learning to type. Okay? It could be 2 things. Maybe he wanted to write about his experiences in Russia into a book or something that he was, going over with George de Mohrenschildt. Another thing could be maybe it was easier to fill out his reports that he was sending to his handler or giving to his handler or leaving for his handler in his post office box if he had typed it up. Maybe his writing wasn't the best, so maybe they suggested that he learn to type. So that could be one reason. I mean, why would he studiously? He got other things to do. Why learn to type? Anyway, illegal. KGB SVR operatives infiltrated into a country without the protection of diplomatic immunity, having assumed new identities and even new ethnicities. Remember, we were talking about that illegals program that ran from the 90s up to about 2010. They were busted under Obama. They were traded for some other spies. They had been in the U.S. illegally under false identities. They were partnered up, a male, female. They bought houses, had children together, and carried out missions. Tried to infiltrate certain trade groups and defense contractors and report back. This is human intelligence, what they observed. All right, illness. Russian slang for someone under arrest. Imagery intelligence. Well, in the JFK assassination, Jaeger Childs was a photo processor for was a defense contractor, photo processor for developing military photos and government photos that Oswald was working on. So here you have this, again, you want to think about it, have this Russian defector, obviously a security risk, working for a defense contractor, okay, that today they would run a background check, FBI report, all these kinds of things. You know, today Oswald wouldn't even made it into the interview, okay. He was referred there by de Mohrenschildt, okay. So Oswald wouldn't even made it into the interview, but here he is processing images for a defense contractor, a former Russian defector, an avowed communist revolutionary, okay, but he's working for a defense contractor that he got the job through, you know, he gets the job through George de Mohrenschildt, who's, you know, passing back his observations to his FBI or CIA handler, and then he gets his next job through his other handler, Mrs. Payne, at the Texas School Book Depository. Anyway, that's image intelligence. And also image intelligence was used to bust the Russians and the Cubans. You know, they took U-2 flights over Cuba. They took, you know, obvious evidence of Russian missile emplacements. You know, they had the big boards up there, Kennedy did, and, you know, they basically busted the Russians and said, look, these are medium-range missiles put here to attack us, and if we're going to put an embargo on them. Now, you know, it tells you the mindset that the people in the military and the CIA, once they passed that intelligence on to Kennedy, they wanted Kennedy to invade Cuba to take out the missiles, okay? He thought it was crazy, okay? And again, after Kennedy's killed, the military and CIA guys are trying to push this narrative that Oswald's a communist. They got false disinformation coming out that Oswald was paid by the Cuban government, and therefore to get public pressure onto the new president, Johnson, to invade Cuba also. Okay? Again, this is what Johnson's formation of the Warren Commission report, this is how he got Earl Warren on the commission, will say, look, I got these guys in the military and intelligence are wanting me to invade Cuba because Oswald was trying to get into Cuba. He went to the Cuban embassy. Supposedly he was paid off by the Cubans. And if we do that, that's going to start World War III. And the death of millions is on your head, Mr. Warren. So what you want to do is narrow it down just to Oswald and nobody else. And that's what they did. Infiltration. The secret movement of an operative into a target area with the intent that his or her presence will go undetected. Well, if you want to think about infiltration in the JFK assassination, well, there's several instances here. Very mild, though. If Oswald was the shooter for General Walker, okay, he would have infiltrated into that area, left his rifle, come back, dug the rifle up, hidden in the spots. Remember I showed you the spots by the Turtle Creek there, in the bushes, to shoot at Walker, if he did it. Okay. Another infiltration would be the infiltration of the shooters into the Dowtex building, into the Texas School Book Depository, into the grassy knoll. And then there's exfiltration, getting them out of there. So you'd have a team of people in vans or trucks or whatever that would be parked near that area with an assault team ready to go and defend them, okay, that they could get all their equipment and leave and get out of the area. And then you had blockers, the people that when they ran up on the grassy knoll, they had Secret Service guys flashing badges saying, hey, no, we've looked in this area, blocking the police, sending them in different directions to give the shooters that have been infiltrated in time to be exfiltrated out. Okay, innocent postcard. A postcard with an innocuous message sent to an address in a neutral country to verify the continued security of an undercover operative. Okay. Again, just because, what do you say, All right, just because Marina is writing back to Aunt KGB in Russia doesn't mean that she's not communicating with other people. Okay? I'm sure she could figure out where the post office was, where, in the old days they used to have on, not every corner, but in major cities, they had these blue boxes that you could drop the mail in. Well, it wouldn't take much for Marina to write a postcard, write a letter, go out when Mrs. Payne isn't there, go for a walk, drop one of these letters to, Uncle KGB in Switzerland, okay, or Sweden or Finland. And that would be a cutout that would get that mail and then pass it on to the Russian embassy there or on to Moscow, okay? And that would contain much more detailed information. And what they're talking about with an innocent postcard, that's just a, hey, Mom, I've arrived in Dallas, and it's all sunny and nice here. And that's just to let you know, boom, Operation whatever, Oswald, is in progress. Intelligence officer. Intelligence officers are professionally trained by their governments, called case officers, operational officers, or handlers. They run operations and recruit and manage the actual spies. Now, this is one that I'm talking about that's been trained on the farm, been trained at KGB headquarters. They're going to be running all kinds of agents, okay? And a lot of these guys end up at embassies, like the Russians would have these guys at their embassy, and then they would run them out of the residentiary there. And then we'd have our guys in in Moscow in our embassy running our people and things like that. And then you'd have other people that would be cutouts, like secretaries, cleaning ladies, whatever, that you give them stuff to drop off, at drop spots. And then a lot of these intelligence officers, okay, they're going to go by and do pickups. So remember I was mentioning about you'd have maybe one of these blue mailboxes or a telephone pole or a box or something that sits there on the street. We've all seen them. And the asset would put an X, okay? And that meant that, hey, I dropped off some information at this prearranged drop site, and then the intelligence officer would just drive by that and see the X, and he knows that, okay, this drop spot A or B or C or whatever is active for this time for this month. And then he would go by that drop spot, what's his name? The FBI agent who was selling out information to the Russians was leaving packages, those little, remember I mentioned about the 35 millimeter plastic camera cases. You can pack a lot of information in those. He was leaving that kind of information in plastic bags, under bridges, up in branches of trees, buried in cemeteries, things like that. And that's what the case officers would be out there getting, or he would send someone out to get that information for him. All right. Let's see. Keep going here. Jedburghs, OSS and SOE, term for teams dropped into Europe before D-Day to help resistance groups. This is basically some kind of, it's like special forces, but it's intelligence guys, special forces. KGB, the Soviet Union's all-powerful intelligence and security service during the Cold War. Now, the KGB, they say doesn't exist, but really it does. They've just taken the different departments of the KGB that handled, like internal dissent, internal spying and stuff like that, the different departments and external, operations, and they've just divided them up amongst different agencies. They've got like this interior ministry that handles the police and stuff like that, and they investigate Russian citizens. Then you've got, gosh, I can't remember them all here. They've got a group that handles, like the FBI, and they handle internal security, watch their spies or watch their embassies, things like that. They've got also the SVR, which handles most of their intelligence or handles intelligence operations around the world, but most of their operations, their intelligence operations, is actually handled by the military unit of their spying, and those guys handle most of the operations in the United States and the Western countries, I believe. And then the SVR handles the other countries like Japan, China, Brazil, things like that. All right, so an L pill, a poison pill used by operatives to commit suicide. Everybody knows, you've seen that in that movie. What was that called? The Mockingjay. They gave them, pills to kill themselves in case they got captured. Legend. A spy's claim, background, or biography usually supported by documents and memorized details. Well, of course, in the case of this JFK assassination, you got Oswald building his legend. So he's been told, maybe because he got in trouble, maybe because he's volunteered in the Marines, that, hey, you did pretty good on that little mission we sent you on to help us bust these Japanese whorehouses that are sending back information to the Russians. So we're going to send you another mission, and you're going to go as a fake defector, okay? And we want you already know a little Russian, that's why we picked you. You're going to brush up on your Russian. We want you to read these manuals about certain secrets and techniques and things about spying. And then we want you to talk about communism and Russian and stuff like that amongst your own Marines, fellow Marines, okay? And that's going to build your legend. They already think you're a little funny anyway, and they're going to call you Oswaldovich and things like that. That's building his legend amongst the Marines. And then when he gets to Moscow, okay, he goes in to the front lobby of the U.S. Embassy, which he knows is wired for sound for the Russians. The Soviet Union, their intelligence is listening in, and he screams, throws his passport down, screams, and says, hey, I'm going to renounce my U.S. citizenship. I'm going to go to, want to live in Russia and become a Russian citizen, and because I'm a communist and all this kind of stuff. And he knows they're listening. He's been told they're listening, and he knows they're listening. And then also he's saying the same thing to his tour guide, who's reporting back to her handler, okay, because she's not an intelligence officer. She's just like Marina, just one of these pretty-faced girls that's, tries to find out more about these tourists that come over and why they're there and things like that. And they're reporting back to their case officer, okay, their intelligence case officer. And then in his letters, he's writing back to his brother, writing to his mother, saying, I'm never coming back to the U.S. I'm definitely a communist, and this is the way for me, and things like that. That's all for consuming by the intelligence of Russia. So they can read that and then try to assess that maybe this guy is legit, okay? And so then that's when they send in Marina. She's doing her job. She's reporting back. He's telling her, and then he's literally building his legend as he's going along, okay? Then when he gets back to the U.S., he's still, on the same mission here, building his legend, posing as a fake communist, posing as a fake revolutionary, but meanwhile never, ever, ever passing out literature in Dallas. Why does he, I was thinking about this before, why does he not pass out literature in Dallas? Why does he not try to infiltrate any groups in Dallas, but only does it for the few months that he's in New Orleans, okay? Because he can do that safely in New Orleans because he knows he's not going to be there, but it builds a legend that he can work off of, okay? Because if he did it in Dallas, it's so conservative there, he would never be allowed or trusted by anybody. This is why he doesn't try to recruit anyone, okay? But anyway, that's part of his legend there. Let's see. Measurement and signal intelligence, a form of technical collection that uses signatures that do not fit into the traditional scope of inment and sigment. Let's see. Signature intelligence. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what that one is, but some kind of signal intelligence. Let's see, MI5, the Domestic Counterintelligence Services, officially known as the Security Services. Well, it's sort of like the FBI, but not exactly. The FBI is more like Scotland Yard for the civilian stuff. For the counterintelligence part, they've created their own unit called MI5. The FBI has kind of taken over that responsibility because J. Edgar Hoover wanted to get more funding, so when World War II came about and the communist threat came about, and especially after World War I, that's when the FBI got into counterintelligence. MI6, the British Foreign Intelligence Service, officially known as the Secret Intelligence Service, very similar to the CIA. Matter of fact, the CIA was modeled on MI6, and then a lot of their guys went and trained over there during the war, and that's how the CIA came about. Mole, an agent of one organization sent to penetrate a specific intelligence agency by gaining employment, a term popularized by John LeClaire. Now, this mole guy would definitely be this FBI agent. Actually, no, he was an asset, excuse me. A mole would be someone that's sent over and infiltrates up through it. So, hold on one second. All right, so Kim Philby would definitely be a kind of a mole, okay? Kim Philby worked for the MI6, and he was a communist or sympathetic to communism back in the 30s when he was going to one of these schools, Cambridge, I believe, Oxford. And then there was another group of people that were all vowed, Marxist, communists. But it's different than after the war, after World War II. Back in the 30s, the 20s and the 30s, especially with the rise of Hitlerism and fascism with Mussolini, a lot of the young people, because their parents started to were such appalled by communism, their parents started to openly embrace Hitler. And of course, just like every generation, you're going to be whatever your parents are, you're going to be the opposite of what they are. So that's where a lot of them went. A lot of them grew out of it, but a lot of them stayed in it. And then they contacted, or Philby did, and then through them other people were contacted, Russian intelligence. And so the first thing the Russian intelligence told them to do was to disassociate themselves from the Communist Party in the UK, stop going to these left-wing meetings, go to the right, go as far to the right, put out your legend, put out your appearance as being ultra-conservative, join the Conservative Party, don't be joining up with the Socialist or the Liberal Party, and appear opposite of what you really are. That way it would allay any kind of suspicion. And then work your way into the civil service and into the intelligence services of the UK. And like in the UK, it's very similar to how it is in Israel, that you don't just go up and say, hey, I want to go apply for the intelligence services. You work for like their foreign service, which is like the State Department here, and for a while, and if you're shown interest or promising, it's a good old boy network. You make entries to other people. They talk to people, they know someone who knows someone who knows someone, and eventually they'll check you out, make sure that you're okay. Almost all of the MI6 people were all good old boy networks. They all were from the right families. They all knew each other. So that way they were trying not to worry about exactly what happened to them was a mole. Someone that was from the outside that was purposely put in to deceive them. Philby was from a very rich family. A lot of people don't know this, that his dad, let me see if I can pull this up here. Yeah, hold on one second. His dad was actually St. John Philby, okay? And St. John Philby was, a British Arabist. He believed that, the way that the British were going to go forward was to have these developed relationships with the Arabs, the Saudis, the other countries and stuff like that. He was also an intelligence officer. He was really big inside the Saudi family. He also converted to Islam, and basically was a backer of the Saudi family there. I believe he actually fell out with them and was thrown out. Let me see here. Yeah, he was an advisor to Ibn Saud, who was the head of the royal family of Saudi Arabia. He was anti-Zionist, okay? And let's see what else happened. But yeah, so he was helping them basically develop the Arab world under the spear of the British Empire, okay? And that's what he did. Of course, his son rebelled against that and started working with the Russians. And eventually, you start off innocent, you start off ignorant, but then when you wise up and realize you've gone in the wrong direction and gone too far, you've gone too far, okay? And you can't back out, so you have to continue. Kim Philby also recruited a lot of other men from Cambridge and Oxford. A lot of these guys are homosexuals, and they all did what he did. They all got out of the Communist Party. I believe Kim Philby even had married a communist woman from like Austria or Hungary or something like that, and then he ended up divorcing her after his Russian handler told him to do that. Eventually, Philby, gets into MI6, starts working with them. He becomes a liaison between MI6 and the CIA. And then that's when we come up against James Angleton, who was completely paranoid that there was a mole somewhere in the CIA or MI6. He was pretty determined it was MI6. And because what was happening is they would come up with these secret special operations, this guy named Wisner, and they all came to nothing. They got destroyed. They got caught. Especially these Albanian missions were completely... Every Albanian mission they sent in got caught. These missions they sent into China got caught. The ones into Korea got caught and destroyed. And it basically drove Wisner, who's head of special operations, into drinking and, I believe, mental illness. And the reason why that was going on is because the CIA was sharing that information with MI6 through their liaison, who is Kim Philby. Okay? They were letting... there's a very close relationship between the MI6 and the CIA, and they were letting the MI6 know about their upcoming operations they were conducting. Okay? And Kim Philby was passing this information on to the Russians. Eventually, one of his compatriots, I believe it was Burgess or one of these other guys, got busted and arrested, sent to jail, and then then MI5 started doing counterintelligence and started going to his associates and realized that Philby and all these other people from Cambridge, Oxford, were all part of the same class and group, and they all came under suspicion. Eventually, they all get arrested. Philby's able to defend himself, and they can't find any evidence against him, even though he's under surveillance. Eventually, he's forced to quit MI6. He takes on a position, I believe, with a British newspaper in Lebanon. Eventually, evidence just comes back from another Russian agent that Philby had been working with them, and then MI5 agents were sent to Lebanon to arrest him. Kim Philby was able to escape back to Russia, and he lived the rest of his life a very sad, miserable, alcoholic, drunk in Russia. Very, very sad life there. But anyway, he was the mole. Jesus James Angleton was also convinced there were other moles and was obsessed with that. And there were other moles, but they came later on. Another mole that I remember... Hold on one second. All right, now there was Pollard, who was working over in the Naval Intelligence and Suitland, but Pollard wasn't the mole that the CIA and the FBI was obsessed about. There was actually, when the Monica Lewinsky thing happened, there was secret recordings of I don't know if it was Clinton or someone that the FBI and the CIA were monitoring, and there was mention of a person. I'm trying to remember the name, I just can't remember it right now. It was something like Skylight or Heartbreak, or there was a code name for the mole, for a mole, that supposedly there was this mole inside the Clinton administration that was reporting everything that, the negotiations that were going on with Clinton, because, you've got the same guy who's in the Prime Minister of Israel now, Bibi Netanyahu, had just gotten elected after Rabin had been assassinated in 96. And from 96 to 99, he was under a lot of pressure by the Clinton administration to deal with Yasser Arafat and Palestinian autonomy. And there was a great push to start a Palestinian state and to, basically give them their own homeland and things like that. But Bibi Netanyahu was completely against that. And so what was happening is that every time Clinton and his State Department would bring up information to put pressure onto Bibi Netanyahu to bring back results, they already knew it. They already knew what was... The Israelis were 2 steps ahead of them. So the Clinton administration and the CIA and FBI came to the conclusion that there was a mole somewhere in the Clinton administration that was reporting back to the Mossad and thus to Bibi Netanyahu everything the Clinton administration had planned to push forward to get them to go along with this Palestinian state. Of course, I'm for a Palestinian state. I just wasn't for a Palestinian state headed by, terrorist murderer Yasser Arafat. And eventually, most likely what happened is that Mossad either killed Arafat in 2004 or helped decline enough to push it along that where he passed on. They would never have any proof, and there's complete deniability about that. But anyway, there was supposedly a mole, and I can't remember his name. It was like Shockman, or it was some really interesting name. And there was a conversation, and I don't know who it was. I think it was some kind of Israeli embassy conversation or telegram that was going through, and it was mentioned the code name for this mole, and to find out what he knew and find out when he was going to report back again. And so the FBI and the CIA just went into complete epileptic fits trying to find out who this guy was. They never did, I don't believe. I don't know who it would have been, But anyway, so the same guy they were trying to fight any kind of peace, settlement, whatever, is now Prime Minister again even though he's a crook and should go to jail. But anyway, we'll see what happens with that. Anyways, that's enough of that. That's more terms we're going across here. And again, we're going to keep getting into these things and showing how it applies to the JFK assassination, and keep trucking along here. All right, take care, and until next time, bye.